accept. We have a second. We have a second, Kevin. And all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? So we've passed unanimously. Is there any public comments?
No, ma'am, there is no public comment.
Okay, but I see that we do have somebody for a public presentation.
Yes, we
Mr.
do.
Bentley?
Just as a preface, so you guys know, well, most of you, I think, have all got a chance to meet with Wallace at some point or another. They are doing the master plan for the Richard Gray Complex Park in the back. And what they're going to present is their first draft of all of it put together. So it's an extensive document. Very proud of it, very proud of their work. And without further ado, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We are very excited and have been very fortunate to work with this commission as well as staff. Jennifer has been a huge guide and leader in this process, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with the city and all the stakeholders on this process. As Jennifer explained, this is a first draft document for the Richard Gray Recreation Complex Master Plan. There's a lot of information here, so I'm going to go through it. I'm going to skip over things that you've already seen. Well, we can actually, I don't know if I have control.
You do.
I guess what I'd love to do is like make this a full, like make the document itself visible altogether. Maybe just put it on full full screen. I just want to be able to see the whole thing all at one time. There you go. Fit width to scrolling. Nope.
Almost.
One of those, it's got to be another one of those options. So you guys, while he's trying, maybe that one with the arrows at either corner. Nope. Well, while he's figuring that out, I'll just go through quickly. You know, the first page, there's acknowledgments, and I just noticed that Mr. Sweeney's not on those acknowledgments, but I think the rest of you guys are, so we'll get Mr. Sweeney on there. As you have time to look through this, it is a draft. Please let us know, give us feedback on any, any inconsistencies you see in it or anything that we need to add to it. But happy to present it to you tonight as it is. The process, as you all know, we met with you all, we met with other stakeholder groups, we had a public meeting, invited members of the public. We had a public survey out there for everyone in the city to take advantage of. We gathered information. We did a good site analysis of the Richard Gray Recreation Complex, and then we made some recommendations. So, you want me to come back and see if I can figure that out? Oh, is this, I can use that? Okay, great. I'll do the best I can here. Is this? I can't even see the top of it. There we go, maybe.
Almost.
Close. Well, I'll do the best I can here. Sorry, guys, I'm not as familiar with Adobe. So here we're thanking everyone. table of contents, we've got an introduction, then we talk about the process, that's what I just went through. When we talk about existing conditions, you all, most of you at least, have seen all of the existing conditions. You're familiar with the property, so you know the site that we're working with. Then we have guiding principles. So I'm going to try to scroll down to that. This is existing conditions. You all know this is the property that we are dealing with in this master plan. Roughly, go down to guiding principles. All right, these are the guiding principles that we landed on after all the stakeholders in the public meeting. First one was safety and security. I'm not going to read through all this language. The second one is uniformity. The third one is community ownership and investment. It's engaging the community. Connectivity, health and wellness, timelessness, local character, celebrating what's unique about Hardeeville, quality of life for citizens and visitors, socialization for those groups, community development, and that just speaks to improvement, just onward and upward, always improving. Bridging communities, there's lots of different areas of Hardeeville, as you all know, so we want to bring all those groups together. And economic development. So that's really setting the stage for more improvement through the park itself. Here's some summary comments from the surveys that we received. So top priority tier 1 elements that we pulled from the survey, picnic areas and shelters were at the top of the list. Playground equipment was right up there too, as well as walking trails. Open space, just a multi-use lawn area that's unprogrammed, and a splash pad, which of course is already integrated into the Juju Hudson playground. The next tier priorities were grills, soccer fields, outdoor fitness equipment, volleyball and beach volleyball. And then the lowest priority were frisbee golf and pickleball. The limitations of the survey are worth noting. Special events were not, and festivals were not the top reason the top reason survey participants visit the park. So just so you know, that's the reason that most people come here. However, improved event space pavilion was not included in the list of amenities to rank for the park additions or improvements. So we just want to make that disclosure. That wasn't necessarily considered, but it came out during some of the stakeholder meetings. All right, so this is a chapter on a couple of pages on the actual recommendations that we're making as a result of the survey and the stakeholder and the public input meetings. I'm not going to go through all these individually because they will be basically put forward in the improvements plan. So this is a plan view of the park illustrating some of the proposed improvements all put together, okay? So we're going to break them down into areas, different areas, and I'll talk about the potential feasibility of some of these things. Hopefully you all can see this pretty well. Is it clear enough for you guys where we are? It's Main Street right here, Epps Avenue, Randall Street, John Smith Road, new rec centers over here. Does everybody see that? I-95? Okay. So I'm just gonna go down this list because it's kind of a comprehensive illustration. It's really important to remember in this thing, and we say this in the introduction, there's no defined timeline for this. This could be a 2050, 2060, 2030. That's really up to the leadership of the city. It's up to things that are outside of our control. What we're doing is we're trying to organize in an illustration on a piece of land, on a limited piece of land, some of the elements that were given to us in our discovery portion of our work. So we can talk kind of about what we think might come first and how that could work, but it's really all dependent on funding, availability of funds. It's all dependent on the will of the city. It's also very important to note that this is not the only park in Hardeeville, and it will not be the only park in Hardeeville utilized for recreation. So none of the priorities or elements that we're showing here necessarily go in front of or in lieu of master planning, designing, implementing other recreation areas in Hardeeville. So, I just want to make that clear. And I think it's important for this group, if you guys agree, that we make that clear to council and to the citizens at large, that just because there's a splash pad here or a pavilion here doesn't mean that before that happens that something else doesn't happen somewhere else. That's not in this master plan. Okay, so we're not saying that before any other recreation complex in Hardeeville is built that all this has to happen. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so we're just trying to show everything that was expressed to us. This is mainly what we heard, a neighborhood park. This is a neighborhood park that is really in the historic center of Hardeeville. And I say the historic, quote unquote, center of Hardeeville because I'm not so sure where the center of Hardeeville will ultimately be, and I'm sure that everybody has their own opinion about that, but that's not for me to decide. That's for council and the citizens to decide. But currently, the historic center of Hardeeville is here. There is a fabric in this area, a community. There's a lot of municipal services and civic buildings here. And this, I would say, is probably, we could say, is one of the first recreation sites in historic Hardeeville. And so it serves this area mainly and the citizens that live within a proximity of here. But it also, as I mentioned in the survey, most people in Hardeeville come to this place for festivals that are kind of like community at-large events. And so it has to serve the people in this neighborhood or these neighborhoods in this quote-unquote historic area. But it also currently serves as kind of a catch-all for community civic-minded type events, like the 4th on Main that was just recently celebrated. So I'm just teeing that up that way, that's what we found it needs to be. Things that we found that it didn't need to be necessarily are a regional, a regional sports complex, and it doesn't need to be any one thing. It doesn't need to be just an entertainment zone. It doesn't need to be a sports zone, but it wants to be mainly a community park where people can like walk the trails and enjoy open space, and connect with one another. Does that make sense? I'm just kind of giving y'all an overview. All right, some of the elements here. Uniformity and a defined gateway. A. That's down here. The main access to the park is, to the other side of this building. It comes right by the side of City Hall right here off of Main Street. And currently you drive by a parking lot, kind of a side parking lot, to get through to the park. That was something that a lot of folks talked about improving. So our recommendation there is to move that parking. I really wish I could zoom in on this thing. The recommendation would be to move that parking to the back of City Hall. Is there a keyboard that goes with this thing as well?
It is, it's back here, would you like?
Y'all forgive me for not being more savvy with this equipment.
Just trying to see what you, if I think I've already moved what you sent me earlier, so you could just click on it.
Well,
and
I
use
can,
your Dropbox.
I can go down. Well, let me just go through. Let me go through everything one at a time. First, we got into planned improvements that are already. I spoke about Juju and the splash pad. These are things that are already on the books. As far as we're concerned in our scope of work, the Juju Hudson Playground is already a design project and ready to be funded and built. Okay, so that was not a part of this master plan. However, it does fit within it. Is everybody pretty familiar with that plan? In that plan is playground equipment. In that plan is a drop-off area, parking, a pavilion, and a splash pad. Also a planned improvement, the dog park and the covered basketball courts. Everybody good with that? Currently out for bid. All right, here's our defined gateway. Here's Main Street, City Hall. What we're proposing to do is to relocate the parking lot that currently sits here behind City Hall, between City Hall and this open space lawn behind us, and to create a nice entry experience along Jim Hatter Way with a gateway, so a secure gateway that goes all the way around the park, starting here. We're also proposing to use the Juju Hudson land here as a kind of an entry feature where we can utilize some kind of iconic Hardeeville structure. We used the train as an example, the Argent Lumber locomotive. You could imagine that this is about the same scale as that pavilion with the locomotive underneath it. So some type of iconic feature up front and creating kind of a little park there, an entry park space that people can use to enter in or drive through as they enter into the recreation complex with a couple of parking spaces and a turnaround there. Because a lot of people are just curious and they want to come up and they want to maybe read some informational signage, find out more about the park, some events that are going on there, or maybe they just want to come here and have a picnic or check in with what's going on and then leave. But they don't want to necessarily go all the way through the park. And the park gates will be closed outside of the dusk, dawn to dusk hours. All right? From the center backside of City Hall, there's a pedestrian access into an open event space. And that is probably our next one. So here's some imagery. There's also the possibility that we can incorporate in that front area some opportunities for civic space. Civic space like a Veterans Memorial. We heard in one of the stakeholder public meetings that there is a Veterans Memorial being planned elsewhere currently. But you could think of other spaces like a space, an outdoor space where leadership could make presentations to citizens, for certain things, and there could be a plaque or some other memorable event that wants to be recorded in an outdoor environment. So this is what it looks like right now, and this is an artist rendering of what it could look like. Obviously, landscaping and signage and furnishings and other things are kind of at the back of the master plan document, but we touch on each one of those very briefly and talk about how that needs to be a part of everything that we're doing here. Lighting for safety, we want to create a nice, clear, defined, safe pedestrian space through here into the park. All right, so pedestrian-centered streetscape is the second thing that we focused on. And when we say streetscape, we're basically talking about Jim Hatter Way. So Jim Hatter Way currently, as everyone knows, leads from that open space over here right behind City Hall all the way down to the circle and around, connects back to Randall. A lot of cars back and forth through there. We're using that space for parking, and so we recognize the need to slow traffic down in there. Obviously, y'all have too in the past because there's speed bumps there, and that road's just in pretty bad shape. So we wanted to improve that experience all along Jim Hatter Way and treat it like it's a part of the park. So we would propose to make that feel a little bit more like a downtown street, except for instead of having retail shops and buildings and things like that on either side of the street, you have a park. You'll have decorative fencing and all the various park elements and amenities like the dog park or the football field. But basically you have on-street, what we would call on-street parking, and it can be angled so that it kind of helps to control the traffic flow and you don't have people backing up across 2 lanes of traffic to get back into the flow of where they want to go. So you can incorporate streetscape furnishings like benches and planters and street lights like we show in the rendering, bollards to control traffic that are removable. All these things can be incorporated, as well as a drop-off point down at the end where the circle exists, and there's currently a first responders and memorial is where we're showing our drop-off, and that was originally planned for Juju Hudson. So this is the view of that roadway now, and it's going right by the open space here. And this is the artist's rendition of that. Okay, so again, the street trees, the landscaping, the on-street parking, the lighting. You can see over here off in the distance what that open space could potentially look like with a little pavilion over there or something like that. Okay, so the event lawn. Currently there's this space behind City Hall. It's a little over 1.5 acres. It's a nice sized space. Got some really great shade trees up against the football field, and it borders Jim Hatter Way as well as City Hall as well as the Senior Citizen Center. It's a well-defined space, and it's a great size piece of land. So we saw an opportunity there. We heard in our meetings that there were movies in the park. There are sometimes performances in certain areas during the festivals and things like that. So we thought this could be an area that we could just provide an open lawn and potential for a little pavilion there. And that pavilion can be it could be a movable stage. It could be relocatable. I mean, it could be something, just a space where you could set up a stage, or it could be something that's more of an architectural feature. But it's at the front of the park. It's close to Main Street. And so it's easily accessible for folks who don't want to go all the way into the back of the park. So we heard that was a good use for this space, and it does not in any way prohibit this space from being used as overflow football practice space, Terry, or as overflow parking space for any other events that are going on there. I'm more than happy to take questions as we go, but it might be faster if I go through it quickly and then y'all ask questions afterwards. Is that okay? All right, so this This is the space across the street from that open field that's just kind of used for overflow parking, and you've got the existing cinder block storage building there that may or may not be taken down soon. I think I might have heard that through the grapevine, but we had written this up before that, so I'm gonna go with it, and then y'all can.
It's coming down this year.
Yeah. So we thought that this would one of the big things that we heard was community engagement. How do we engage the community? How do we get community ownership in the park? Well, there's a lot of ways that we can do that. We wanted to set one area aside for that, and this was just kind of a remnant area that really wasn't being utilized, and so we thought this could be a great little community garden space. We heard in one of our stakeholder meetings that there's funding sources available for these kinds of things. Butterfly gardens, educational gardens, partnerships with local schools or community groups or just the neighborhood. We thought it'd be a good opportunity to put up a fence around this space and let the community plug in with a plan for how to make it into a garden area. We could repurpose this cinder block building as a shed, a storage shed for that. We could use it for a variety of things, but it would really be not a city project as much as it would be a community project, plug-in space. So that's what that area is scheduled for, or the recommendation that we're making in that area. The small active recreation space. This is currently the playground space next to the basketball courts. We're not sure what the best use is for this space. It's a decent size space. You could fit 2 more basketball courts there. You could fit some other hard courts there. Since we don't know what it is, we left it blank and just programmed around it. It could be more overflow parking. We are showing proposed parking next to it on the other side of that space from closest to Juju. So we just left that as a placeholder. And there's a few of those in this that we don't want to assume too far down the road what the needs of the community are, but it doesn't hurt just to leave a space for something that's in the future. We were showing a couple of different recreation, active recreation uses there because it's a smaller space and there aren't any trees there currently. Parking lot improvements across the board. We're talking about here improving the existing parking lot between the baseball, the baseball and the football field and the concession area and the locker rooms. Definitely want to resurface that, landscape it, put new lighting in, new wheel stops, reconfigure it a little bit, and then also utilize this space on the other side of that small active recreation area for parking. This is an addition of 88 parking spaces. So we're utilizing the ones we have up here, making them look better, nicer, and putting some new ones in here. You could do that with grass, by the way, in certain areas. I think we're planning on doing that at the dog park, and so there's a photograph of wheel stops in the grass and how that can be done. All right, this is a really big one. We're going through this list really entering the park and driving down the road. We're not going on a priority level. But if we were going on a priority level, I think this one would be probably number 1 based on our survey results. So this is the passive park area and the trail system. So at the end of Jim Hatter Way, we've got the little drop-off loop here. Juju playground and parking lots on either side of that. And what we'd be proposing is the beginning of a trail system, a multi-purpose trail system that's 8 feet wide, hard surface trail system that initially would, at the very least, go around the edge of the ponds and the baseball fields and hook back up over here next to the soccer field and come back down to that same location. That's a half a mile. That's a half a mile trail plus or minus. We would propose to clean up the lagoon banks, add a lot of landscaping there. There's an absence of shade along those lagoon banks. We would propose a lot of those picnic shelters that were asked for in the survey and in the stakeholders meetings, as well as some fishing docks or piers for the fishing tournaments. And we would probably, create, some locations, some gathering locations, kind of wayfinding locations along the way that would incorporate those shelters. And when we talk about shelters, we're just talking about a place where you can escape the heat a little bit. There might be a water cooler there, or a water fountain, or something like that. It might be lit for the evenings. But we want to provide safe access to these ponds all the way around. And then I think you could imagine like a second phase of that trail system maybe going around the other side of the ponds and hooking up, and that might be another half mile of trails. You could even phase that, and it could start out as a mulch path, that second phase, and then maybe you put some gravel down, and then one day maybe you hard surfaces as people use it. But that 8-foot width gives you plenty of width to make it a nice trail for folks who are walking, running, who might want to rollerblade or something like that. It's a great exercise at recreational use. Now this is what it looks like now. And this is just kind of how we envision that space after it has some of these improvements. The ball fields area, just kind of those zones that are already developed in between the ball fields, we feel like just need to be brought up to speed with everything else in the park. So at some point, as the park improves, the improvements are the sidewalks and the organization of the batting cages and all the various practice elements that are in that area just need to be cleaned up, organized, and made to feel more uniform like the rest of the park. So we incorporated, in the budget some funds to do those improvements. And this, there's an image of how you kind of want that area to feel after it. The park, as the improvements come, it's just going to get more and more use, and so you just want a higher level of finish and durability on all of your amenities. Randall Street Gateway. So Randall Street comes in and hooks up with Jim Hatter Way on the other side of the ARP Church. And it comes all the way from Main Street, as you guys know, and we heard on various occasions that there needs to be the flexibility of being able to get out of the park in at least one other way, other than going straight out this way to Main Street. So that Randall Street Gateway would be a secondary entrance and exit, but it would be gated with monumentation signage, and there would it'd be nice to have a turnaround there as well for when that gate is closed. And it'd be nice if that came in on a little passive park space. It's a part of that larger trail system that we talked about on the back side of the pond. So that's what this improvement is. And there's a picture of what could look like on the other side of Randall Street. And then so it's kind of a misleading image, but this, what you're looking at is basically Randall Street's back here. So this is looking from the ball fields to Randall Street, but we're basically just showing what it would feel like if, you know, this is the current dog park area that we're looking at. And so if there was a little pavilion there and you kind of cleaned out some of the existing trees and added some canopy trees and just opened all that area up, you'd have a much larger park on the other side. Multi-purpose fields, the area up against I-95, between the ponds, I-95. We think that some of this is high ground, hopefully. Again, this is all, you know, full disclaimer, we don't know how many wetlands we have back here. In the old wetland sketches, this was high ground. That doesn't necessarily mean it is today, but maybe by the time this ever gets done, it will be again. So we're just showing the ability to clean out some of those trees, which this is just forested land, so it's mostly planted pine trees over there. You know, keeping as much of that buffer along 95 as we need to maintain a sound buffer and a visual buffer from I-95, but just provide some of that open space there that everyone asked for in the survey, in the stakeholders meetings. Now, I'm about to get to this spine road here, which goes all the way around. That's not necessary to have to do this part of, you know, the park improvements. I mean, you could access this right here, you know, right off of Randall Street. You could build yourself a little gravel parking lot over there that would handle overflow parking for any of your events, and that overflow parking could even access these fields. So really, this is an exercise in cutting down some trees, draining it to a pond, building that pond so that it could dry, and maybe having a gravel parking lot next to it, and you've got, you know, a useful space for throwing the frisbee. You know, if they're having baseball practice and soccer practice like they are right now, and football practice on all the other fields, then you can come down here and hang out. And you know, this is more like Forsyth Park in Savannah. I mean, without the urban context, but it's just a big open field. It could also be used for overflow of all those, you know, football, soccer, but I don't think it would be necessarily. The recommendation is not to program it. Large active recreation area. So if I could go back quickly in the presentation. All right, so we just got done talking about this space down here. Now we're just assuming you can get access, and then it's over here to this letter P. So this is just another area that on the aerials and in the old wetland sketches showed as potentially high ground. And we just wanted to show that, you know, in the same way, you can utilize that space. You can get access to it. You could send a bush hog out there today and cut a path to it and open it up and make it into something. We're not sure exactly what that something is yet. You know, there were a lot of things mentioned that may or may not be suitable in the stakeholder meetings, but that's not for us to determine. We think that this is far enough out to where we can just kind of show it as a bubble. We can tell you that it is, and the wetland survey will have to show that eventually. I thought I had an acreage on this, but it's easily 5 acres. So do a few different things with it. You could expand your ponds. I mean, your ponds could be a good bit larger, and they'd feel great if they were. So if nothing else, maybe you would want to do that. There's the ability to put, vehicular roadway around it with parking, if you ever needed that. The thing you notice right here is another shelter and a pathway. And so that, we're showing some photographs here, the potential of doing like sports courts or something like that there. That is way too far in the future for us to determine. This is the loop road. We're calling it the loop connector road. Again, it's probably a long way down the road, but we did want to show that potentially there's enough high ground in these areas on the backside of the ponds to create a pathway system that goes all the way around from Randall Street all the way up to the soccer field. It would take, there are some tight spots that would have to be, designed with a little bit more detail, but conceptually at this level, that is possible to have that circulation network around. So you guys could imagine, clearing that out as a service road. Bush hogs and things like that could get through there and start cleaning it up over time. Over the next 10 years, maybe you put some gravel down, and maybe you just go here first, down to the multi-purpose fields, and then maybe one day you decide you want to go up here or over to this shelter, and it's just kind of an incremental thing that you could potentially do. If nothing else, it could be a grass trail system over to where we're going to John Smith Road. If you put parking along that roadway, you could have up to 120 on-street parking spaces on that loop road. All right, now we have the connection. So at the top of that loop road back there, through the wetland, over to Royal Oaks, Royal Live Oaks Academy. And this is, we would imagine, a wetland boardwalk, which would be a really nice thing. You have to clean some things up in there to do that. But some of those little picnic shelters kind of as bookends on either side of something like that for safety and security and just to make sure that everybody has a waypoint and knows where they're going. And then that could tie into the Royal Oaks Academy's bus loop with some signage and a crossing, and then a pathway system that goes all the way up to John Smith Road, and then directly across from the intersection where the recreation center is planned to be built. We're recommending some heavy signage and signalization of that crossing across John Smith Road. That's a hairy spot, so we would definitely want a warning light at a minimum there for traffic coming down John Smith Road to make sure that that was safe. We think that by incorporating, working with, within the Royal Oaks Live Academy and the Rec Center property line outside of the DOT right-of-way, if we can clean up that edge and put some trees and some grass there and some signage, that it could slow people down. So hopefully that is a fairly clear understanding. And here's some examples of the picnic shelters and the boardwalks. This is just a plan view of vehicular connectivity. So, there's kind of a gateway right here up at the front of City Hall. This is the gate. You can go on Jim Hatter Way, back to the Randall Street gate. You got a drop-off loop here. You got potential for a drop-off loop over here for the ball fields. The potential for a loop road that connects back around to this parking area. All these pink shaded areas are parking lots. And there is the potential in the future to have a connection this way, but it would have to work out with this property owner to be able to reach John Smith Road, which we have not envisioned that necessarily at this point in time. And then this is just a pedestrian connectivity map. What this circle right here shows you a 5-minute walk. That's a quarter-mile radius. So a 5-minute walk is a very comfortable walk for most people, and it's not at fast pace or anything like that. So you can see that most areas of the park. I mean, if you took this center and put it on Juju, I mean, you can get almost everywhere within the park within a 5-minute walk, conceptually. And these are all the various trail networks. The dashed black lines are sidewalks. The red dashed lines are probably like a gravel trail. The green dotted lines, whether you can see them or not, are more of a nature trail system that could be done. This is a boardwalk. And the red lines, the continuous red line is the 8-foot multi-purpose path. So then we just go to a standard section. I'll go through these very quickly. There are some very general landscape standards that need to be implemented here. If you guys are familiar with building houses in any of the PUDs or doing permitting for construction in the city, if you're familiar with the process of kind of a design review board, where there's a group of people that look at the plans and make sure that there's a certain level of quality and character that are being put into those plans prior to their approval. Basically, what we'd like to propose, what we're proposing here is a set of standards set by you or by the city in some way. I'm assuming this board would do it, or somebody associated with this board. So anytime your leadership comes to you and says, hey, we're going to do this out there. We're going to put a fence in. Well, let's make sure the fence meets the standard. But we're going to put a bench in. Well, let's make sure the bench meets the standard so that you don't end up with a hodgepodge of things out there, so that you have a uniformity, so that you don't plant a random tree out there that doesn't fit within the context of this environment. And you can see out there where that's been done in the past, and it's just not successful. And that's what kind of hurts that hurts the park and the image of the park. So what we want to do is give you some general ideas for how you would set standards for landscaping. For instance, you would want drought-tolerant plants, but you want trees that provide a certain amount of shade, that are low maintenance. You don't want to give your maintenance crews any more trouble than they need to keep the place looking good on a regular basis. Sign standards. You can't just willy-nilly put a sign out there. You have to have a certain font, a certain height of letters and things like that for both directional and monument signage. This is not a design for this park. This is just an example of a sign standards outline. It's actually for a couple of different places. But you want all your signage to look the same, from the ADA accessibility sign to the sign that says that this is the baseball field number 1. You want those signs to look similar, be in the same family. Your fencing and your furnishings, it wants to be in the same family, look like they belong together. Your architectural standards, I think we can look to some very simple vernacular, southeastern detailing and materials that are local, and indigenous to this area and that's been done to a certain degree out there, but we want to have high quality materials that stand the test of time. The pavilion that was designed for Juju, I think, is a good example of doing that the right way. And the reason, I mean, there's two reasons. They're indigenous materials. Well, there's three reasons. They will stand the test of time. I mean, a metal roof is obviously going to last longer than a shingle roof. But it's also in the form of like an old traditional depot. And Hardeeville has a history of, a railroad history. So all those things are kind of coming together in that design. Infrastructure standards, I won't bore you too much with this, but you can tell when the infrastructure is thought through and done in a way that performs and is functional in its intended environment. So you don't want, for instance, a deep-throated drain inlet for a kid, to fall off of his skateboard and bust his shins on. And I don't mean to sound like a what do they call us, or other generations, like cupcakes or whatever. But I mean, we just want it to be a safe and secure environment. You don't want a kid falling down that thing. So we would design our storm drains more like this, and it's not something that everybody picks up on until there's an accident. But this is the better way to do it for a park environment. So that's just an example of that. So different, ADA accessible, truncated dome, pavers, wheel stops, striping, all those things need to be taken into account and standardized. Lighting, we need to have a lighting standard. The most important thing I can point to in lighting is that you want all of your different lighting, because you have different heights in a complex like this, different levels. You want them to feel like they're in the same family. And you want them to be full cut off to the extent possible so that you avoid light pollution. Well, that's the main thing. I think those are the main two things on lighting. You want to make sure that all the accessories that go with those lights are accounted for when they go in. So things like security cameras can be associated with lights, and they need to be planned for up front. All right, so for each one of those elements that I just went through, we put together a budget range. And this is probably the hardest thing that we have to do with this, and it's it can look very, very, very daunting. But we do not like to be the lowest bidder on anything that we produce. So we want to give you sensible, conservative, very conservative numbers, and we want to give you a range. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do something for less. We're just trying to give you something to go by on some of these things. And it doesn't necessarily account for every little detail. So you just have to keep that in mind. We're just trying to kind of get you guys in the ballpark, so to speak. No pun intended.
And also think about phasing too. I know a lot of folks see these numbers and, it's $4 million. It's over the life.
Could be across 100 years. I mean,
yes, our goal is between 10 to 15 years. So.
We'll see these numbers. There's two. I want to see the rest of them.
yeah. So I mean, there's for defined gateway. I mean, 460 to 600. Pedestrian centered streetscape, is $500,000. Event lawn, 400. Community garden, there's a low one. Under 100. Small active recreation area. I'm just kind of giving you some numbers about what it would be to do a sport court. you know, just kind of give you something to think about. Parking lot improvements. And we tried to break a few things out, you know, like some of the various trail types or signage or landscaping for each one of these areas. Those standards just need to be kind of incorporated into every one of these things. It's like salt and pepper, it goes on everything. Passive park trail system's a pretty big one, but again, you could knock out the first phase of that for well under, you know, these numbers. Ball field improvements, Vandal Street Gateway. We didn't give you a number for the large active recreation area just because it's a big area and it just depends on what it is. So, which one was the one that I did in total?
Small active recreation, it's 54,000 to 72,000.
Okay.
It's all the way, yeah, you said top.
Yeah, okay. So those are the budgets, and then we popped in some funding sources and partnerships that we heard about or have researched along the way, and I'm sure there are more out there than just these ones that we're showing, but you know, PARD grants, I think the city's all, you know, already on top of those kinds of things coming from the state. Trust for Public Land, Community Foundation of the Low Country, and you know, PRT trails and tourism grants are out there, and you know, there's a variety of partnerships. A lot of them were in our stakeholder meetings, so there's a lot more out there that there weren't. But I mean, I'm sure you guys know all the partners that you could reach out to, and we can continue to give you a more robust list, but you might be giving us some of those as well.
I'll go ahead and say right now, the Barracudas are good for 100 bags of mulch
Awesome.
as a start. That'll put a dent in that 6.2 million we just looked at. Roughly.
It's not quite that much. But again, you know, and this is what I tell my boss too, not to panic when you see those numbers. It's, you know, it's a long plan and it's something that needs to be done. You know, for any of you that have been in the back and have seen our complex, it's just kind of, you know, been put together, and, you know, we have bits that are new and bits that are old, and we just need to make it as uniform as possible, and I think our citizens certainly deserve that, and, you know, it does show what we can do. Just means a little bit more work on our end and grants to find more money to get it done, but if it's approved, we're gonna get it done.
And a lot of the time, half of the battle on the grant funding is having this.
Yes.
You know, you just continue, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know that this is just a part of the package, you know,
Yes.
this was a part of our plan. After you prioritize things, and then can look down the road at what you wanna do.
You can take it piece by piece out of your master plan and use it, and it's a very good tool, and, you know, it's good to have it as a standard as we move forward, for all of our, parks. I was telling Wallace, the entryway, I mean, it just, the imagery that they have in this plan, it just really, it's very inviting. Right now, the parkway isn't very inviting. You know, it's just kinda like, I gotta go to practice, and then I drive in and everyone is everywhere. I was just out there Thursday night, just checking on some stuff, and we had people parking all just everywhere, crazy. No uniformity, and, you know, just needs to be something, like I said, that's, the community can be proud of, and I think this, plan certainly speaks to that volume.
Multi-purpose was really high, what the people wanted.
Open space there.
Yeah, open space. What do they plan to do with, I mean, just picnics or just sit there, stuff like that?
And I walk around it.
Okay.
So the trail system, you know, that we talk about in here, that's why we kind of tried to put the trails and the open, you know, the kind of the passive part together. I mean, you don't see it on this drawing as much, but, you know, there's multi-purpose fields are right down here. And it's like that image that I gave you of Randall Street. This is just a more pleasant space to walk in than this is. So this feels very closed off and very unsecure. You can't really see what's going on in those trees. There could be like a panther back there or some bad guy. But here, when it's kind of opened up, and it's, you know, not that you don't have shade,
I get you.
but yeah.
Very good.
And there are a lot of people that are walking in there. There's quite a bit
Yeah.
of moms, whether from Tormento or from us, or moms just coming down there in general.
Yeah.
So, having a defined space with a mileage for them that they know they're walking, you know, 2 ounces a mile, I get that. I do have one question, and maybe I missed this, not, you know, just coming on or last meeting or whatever, and it's just a curiosity thing. Why move the dog park from where it was existing at?
Well, Jennifer might be able to answer this better than I do, but from what I understand, is it's an unsafe area currently, and in order to improve the location where it is now, it would be further down the road.
Okay.
Just because it's an uneven, kind of questionable base material out there. It used to be a land, I guess people used to dump trash over there.
It's construction
So-
landfill, so after it rains, if you go out there,
Oh, I didn't know
all the
that.
glass, yeah, it bubbles up. It's just not, it was a dog park, and then they took the sign down, and people are still using it as a dog park. So that's one of the reasons why, and it's not a very large space that allows for a large dog space, or a small dog space, or a senior dog space. It doesn't provide the provision to be able to market it that way. So, you know, we've looked at some other areas, and it's somewhere down here that we're gonna talk about it too. You know, the council wants to have a workshop on it, and then, you know, we'll bring Wallace back for that too. You know, of showing that we've vetted all of the other areas and that we own, and that's where it's at right now, is just about the best place for it. Or maybe, I think, where the community garden is or something, there might be a little bit of talk about that, so. And it is the same dimension, so we would be able to do that. We just didn't look at it that way because it was outside of the park perimeter. So, but that's one of the reasons why.
Now, the only thing I would have any qualms about with this is parking. It just, I mean, and I know you're adding, but I've seen that place full too. That would be my only, and I know there's only so much you can do with so much area. It is interesting though, if that road were to be built around the outside, that there could be additional parking there. And I see one real sore spot for me personally. The access going up to the concession for the fields, it looks really closed off, like no vehicle traffic. One of the things is I go to Sam's on a lot of occasions to
So,
bring
you
stuff
would
in.
come around here.
Yeah. And right now I can pull up to where it's not that far to walk.
Is this one not a good one?
No, there's some water meters and stuff, that would be towards this is field 2 up here at the top. What field, is that field 4? That's 4, isn't it? No, that's 2, yeah, softball.
Yeah, that's softball
Okay.
too, and then baseball.
There's some water, pipes that are shallow along there. So we're not supposed to come up that way. But, I mean, it's something that, if you're gonna go in there and take a hard look, it's something that can be done.
Yeah, so I mean, this access would not be able to be terminated until something was done to improve this access.
Right, and then
That's what you're saying.
there are batting cages that are left off of there that you really
Well, we didn't leave them off of there. We're recommending organizing them differently because they're,
You're proposing to move the brand new one that just.
you gotta start somewhere. Well, maybe we'll work around that. We might have to do that, so.
But I think otherwise, I think you've hit a lot of sore spots. And I'd love to see it done tomorrow. I mean, it's a lot of bugs and but you see the renderings. And, most likely we've been places like that. And it is much more appealing than turning in and seeing 6-foot chain fences and such as that.
Anybody else have any questions? Kevin?
Yeah,
Ashley?
all the things that we've shown are for the participants. What about the infrastructure, the maintenance, those type of things? This is a big facility, especially when it's getting closer to the end. But it seems ineffective to have to bring in all of your maintenance gear to keep up fields, trails, all those things. I don't see any increase in, maintenance building on site, those type of things, staff areas, those type of things, staff parking that doesn't take away from people parking, that type of stuff. But mostly the maintenance area. I mean, you've got 4 fields plus turf field plus trails. Trails require a lot of maintenance. Just and all the parts and pieces, benches and lights and stuff, they always need something done to them. So
Sure.
it doesn't make sense to bring in down the road everything you need to maintain this place.
That's a very, very good point. Very good point.
This is a precursor so we can get more people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, we only have 2 staff members in Public Works, currently takes care of the fields and everything, and we hope to eventually take those positions back. They were with Parks and Recreation at one point, so we hope to be able to get there, because we do need to be able to take over. And the shop that's down there is pretty large. Right now, I think we've got 2 or 3 motors in there, Arctic Cat, so it's able to, maintain. We don't have any office space or anything like that down there. Once the rec center's built, that'll be our main thoroughfare, so to speak, for staffing. But you're right, we need to have some areas in here that at some point.
Well, and the good news is that there's space. I mean, you got a good bit of land right here, well, assuming that it's dry, and here, to be able to put some more localized structures. I don't know I don't know enough to know what the philosophy is of the maintenance crews, whether they like to have, a shed, kind of like restrooms, like a shed here and a shed there, or if they want something that's central. But I think that there's land for it to be programmed in for sure. And that those guys, as soon as they come on board and they get their arms wrapped around everything, that should be a programming element that they.
Sometimes
they
if
work
you don't show it up front, you put all the pretty stuff up there, and then you decide, well, I gotta take away this in order for me to do this. Then people start throwing their arms up in the air and saying,
I wonder if we could show it kind of like we have these dashed lines for the batting
or you
cages.
could, where the butterfly garden is, where the white building is, because that's going away at some point. That might be an area.
Yeah.
And it's people associated with the building there, so that might be something. That building is my understanding going away because it's unsafe and asbestos and what have you at some point this year. But it doesn't mean that we can't erect one there and have something as long as it's aesthetically pleasing. But at least it's something that people can recognize as that's there. I don't necessarily know that I'd want it right at the beginning of the park, but you can kind of show it somewhere in and around there. There's
Cover it up.
yeah, there's lots of trees. Yeah,
The existing shop down there has gotta be
it's pretty big.
2,500 square foot.
Yeah, it's
3,000
larger
square
than this
foot.
room.
I mean,
It's pretty
it's
big.
plenty big that they stored 2 or 3 gators, 3 or 4 big the big lawn mowers, big riding mowers.
Where is that now?
It's right next to the locker rooms.
Yeah. It's down there. And then we also, like I said, Public Works stores all their stuff up here. And again, like what Kevin's saying, at some point, Parks and Rec needs to be able to take that back to be able to maintain it on site. It causes more that you've gotta, you gotta move from site A to site B and get your trailers and all that kind of stuff, so it's best to have those stuff on site. The bigger you get, it just depends, especially when you have stuff at East Argent or here and, all over the place. You've gotta have a central localized area where you can, store your maintenance, field equipment and all that stuff that's, for the whole city, not just this complex.
I think, I think for sure we could make that, like, right after standards, we could just talk about maintenance. I mean, we could just have a
Yeah.
page right after
Just
this
have
that
an
talks about
addendum,
maintenance. Because it really does, it needs to be considered in every aspect of this thing. I mean, don't implement X until you've got maintenance for it and a location and capacity for that. 'Cause that's a great point.
I have a question. Where, beside where the concession stands are, which I'm assuming there are public restrooms there, where else is there a public restroom?
So, there would be one associated with Juju Playground, okay? Let me go back to the master plan. The other ones that we have noted are the potential for a pavilion here, a small pavilion structure that's associated with kind of the ponds, where you could do kayak storage and things like that, but also have a restroom in there. And then I think that, if you ever did anything over here, that this would be, a location for a rest station, a trailhead rest station that has restrooms in it. And I think that might cover your bases. But you could as well have one up at the front of the park, associated with this pavilion. I mean, if we're dreaming, why not dream big, right?
Well, it's either that or every time you have an event, you're gonna be bringing in porta potties.
Yes, ma'am.
We,
And
we have bathrooms that are down there. We have them at the baseball complex and we have them at the football complex. And then once Juju is built, our centralized area where we have most of our festival events, that's where the bathrooms are located. But as we expand further out, you want people, if they're out on the multi-purpose field, then they gotta walk all the way back. It kind of becomes a little bit of a pain, so you wanna be able to spread them out as best you can, so.
And the ones that you do have and the ones that are proposed, is there supply, storage there too?
Yes.
Yeah, and we really haven't gotten to that level of detail on what's been proposed, but that should definitely be considered in any of these full programs, and those architectural elements. I know it's a lot to, kind of digest and think about, but
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Malik, thank you so much for your presentation. It's a beautiful program.
thank y'all very much. We appreciate it and look forward to more feedback as you have time to get into it.
Jennifer, are you going to be able to send copies to us of this so that we can?
Yeah, I can send you the link. It's a Dropbox account, or I can print them up before you guys leave. I've got one, just where I started going through some of the stuff. But yeah, we can send that out for you guys to review and look at.
Yeah, I'd like to have one.
Yeah. Well, our goal is to get this in front of council. So I mean, if you all are okay with it, if there's anything else aside from the storage issue, Wallace can certainly add that in. Our goal is to get this in front of council by the end of this month. Hopefully we'll be able to do a workshop. We're waiting to kind of get confirmation back, but our goal is to put it in front of council, I think, by the 22nd of August.
Do we have any idea when this would start?
Well, it can't start until council approves the master
Yeah,
plan,
right,
and
right.
once the master plan is approved and adopted, then every budget year we'll have to associate what part of the complex we wanna
So it's
tackle, and then
down
find the money
road
for
quite
it.
a bit, yeah.
Well, it's a
Every
project
year.
by project
Yeah.
basis. So you think of, just think of how the dog park or Juju or the covered basketball
Yeah, let's get
happens.
rid of
So
it.
you just think, now you can think of those things happening in alignment with this, or at least with this as a guiding principle to the discussion. So when somebody says, hey, I'd like to have a bocce ball court in the park. And you say, well, let's go look at the master plan, figure out where it could be, figure out if it's within this year's budget or next year's budget, if it makes sense, and then we'll implement it as the funds.
Now, there's no connection between the rec center and this. They're entirely separate.
Yeah, no, they're completely entirely separate.
Okay.
There is the connection piece,
Okay.
obviously to get, folks traveling from here to there. But this is completely separate. It's just a guiding principle for us to be able to follow, and slowly take pieces out, just like we did for basketball. We decided we had enough money, it was in our CIP, which all of, bits and
Yes,
pieces of
yes.
this. And, we'll present every budget year, every budget cycle, we'll present what we wanna do.
Yes.
If it's fencing of field A and B or whatever, we'll be able to present that, so, this isn't gonna happen overnight, it's gonna
No.
take a while, but the idea is to get that whole complex, just as this draft is presented, so that you have a very good finished product, and then maintenance is certainly key, like what Kevin was saying, we've gotta have the staff to be able to maintain, the larger we get, as if we don't have routine maintenance, it creates all kinds of problems.
And the thing I would add to that you could get started on right after this is adopted, is you can say, okay, if one of the recommendations in this plan is to have standards that we can adhere to,
Yeah.
let's get those standards in place. So this gives you kind of some big picture ideas as to what a standard looks like, but it does not define the standard. I think that is, for this body or council to define.
Okay.
And so I think that's a document that you could start kind of chipping away at. It's kind of like an ordinance for what happens in your parks. And it's not just for this park, it's for, like Jennifer said, that it's a guideline for all your parks.
Yeah, uniformity is key. That way when, whether you're in East Argent or Oakty or wherever our parks might be, you're in a city of Hardeeville park just by,
Right.
walking into it. It's that feel and that uniformity, so.
Okay.
That's the goal. Like I said, Wallace has done a really good job. I know we've certainly butted heads a few times, but, I really wanted to make sure that it was a product that not only that I believe in, but that, our community deserves. And I hats off to them for putting up with me and, getting this product out. It's a really good product. I'm very proud of it.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Jennifer, back to you. Is there any old business to discuss?
Yes, there is.
You said figured it out.
You did, when did you?
I told you all before, we had done an informal RFP for the dog park bid. We did receive 2 bids. Both of them were over the bid, so we will probably resubmit. We do have a meeting tomorrow, so hopefully we'll get a little bit more information, but just wanted to put that out there. We have spoken to both contractors to let them know if, just to be patient. It's either we're gonna have to do a rebid or get more money. But again, we're gonna try and meet with council. I think they want to do a very quick workshop on it. And then, from there, we'll kind of move to the next step. So that's all the whole business that I have.
Okay. And on the approval of the minutes of last month, is there anybody who has any corrections or comments? I do have one, Jennifer.
Mhm.
On number 10, this is a little bit trivial, however, it talks about Kathy speaking.
Mhm.
It's the only place in the entire minutes that the last name is not used as well.
what you all do is, excuse me, is review over these policies, and then, get them back to council. Council reviews over them, and they might have some suggestions, and then we kind of go back and forth. So we did present this information to council, and they had a few requests. One of the main requests was to take out the, what do you want to, sorry. Hold on, I'm having a complete breakdown. What was it? Was it the naming rights, sorry.
Yeah.
They wanted to take that out of this one. So now we have changed this to just the sponsorship and donations policy. So we are in the process of working on the facility naming rights. I think there was a little, some concerns about how we move forward, whether someone wants to name a park or a facility. We've got the rec center that's getting ready to be built, and if somebody gives I don't know, $20,000, are they going to have the name named after them? Trying to put everything in order. So we're working on that. But we did take that out. I highlighted some of the changes. The other main thing in this was that council did not want to be allowed to authorize any of the solicitation of sponsorships. So any of our council can't ask for money. So it's up to us. The city manager basically says to his managers, yes, you can go do this or what have you, but council can't ask. So we changed that. But it's pretty much the same thing. Like I said, we just changed a few little things, added some other stuff. I tried to highlight everything so you can see where we made those changes. But if everyone is okay with those changes, we're just gonna approve it and then send it back to council for their final approval before it becomes a policy, adopted policy.
Are there any questions or comments on this? Then we'll listen to a motion to approve, send forward,
I'll make a motion to approve.
and a second. All in favor? Opposed?
Okay, and then the last thing again is just an approval of the draft that was just presented to you. So if you all, basically it's not approving the draft, it's basically giving your stamp of approval for us to move forward. Ultimately, council is the one that approves it, but we want council to know that you all have reviewed it. We've made comments about some of the changes that need to be made and that you all approve that as it is.
So will the council end up seeing any of the changes that we asked them to make?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Any questions or statements?
Once they get it, will it ever come back to us per se, or will, like for a final plan, this is draft. If it, at some point it becomes a master plan,
Yes.
does it come back around
Yes.
for another type of
Mhm.
approval vote?
Yes, it does. The draft, like I said, goes to council, just like it's coming here. And then I feel that council's gonna have a lot of questions, and they'll maybe want some changes to be made. And once they do, same thing with like the policy, we'll ask Wallace to make those changes, and then we'll get that out to you all for approval. And then from there, it goes back to council for a final reading. So yeah, sometimes it's a lot of back and forth, but you guys are always appraised of every action that we do.
Anything else? Then if somebody would make a motion that we request that it be moved forward,
I'll request that motion to move it forward.
and second? All in favor? All opposed? Forward.
Right.
And the director's report.
I'll make it short and sweet. I didn't realize, my goodness, it's 7 o'clock. So we have lots of different stuff that is going on in PRT. Festival on Main, we are still plugging away on that. We actually have a meeting, I believe, Wednesday with the committee. So I think we're looking at adding a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. We're still trying to figure out having a classic car show, having some trouble trying to get folks to join in on that. So we're working diligently on that. We've gotten all of our entertainment done, all of our rides, so we're moving along very quickly with that. We also have the Battle of the Badges. I'm sure the police and fire are ready for year 2. have the sponsorship packets ready for those that we'll be able to distribute to the community as well. Let's see what else we got. And I don't know that you guys will get the really nice, pretty newsletters anymore. That was done by our lovely intern, Miss Shelby Taylor. Her last day is Friday. Yeah, so we hate to lose them, but she's done a really good job. And Cole will be losing him on Tuesday, and then Sean will be his final day is Friday. So we are taking soccer registration. Our numbers are down this year. We are looking for coaches, and we're hoping at some point that we're going to get these numbers up. Again, I stress the staff stuff to be able to go out and get and market this. We're doing is pretty much all we can, but the numbers are down this year, so it's a little bit of a disappointment. Screen on the Green is coming up. I believe, and this one's fun. This is one of my favorite. This is the How to Train Your Dragon. That's coming up, so hopefully you guys will come out and support that. It's going to be on the 30th of August from 7:30 to 10. And then after that, we have one in September. That's going to be Bumblebee. So that one should be fun as well. So we're continuing with that. Fill the bus. For those of you that don't know, we just did that last Wednesday. Huge turnout again from Sun City. Can't thank them enough, and also to the public that came out and donated their supplies here to City Hall. We appreciate all of that. We also delivered all of the supplies to Hardeeville Elementary, Royal Live Oaks Academy, and Hardeeville Middle School as well. So three truckloads basically. So again, can't thank everybody for that. We're going to try and work next year with some more of the different groups. I think Hilton Head Lakes will try and get in there, and just different folks that might want to help.
Did that, right? They're delivering stuff to Hardeeville Elementary this week.
We do, Hilton Head Lakes and Margarita together have always done a combined program where we get the teachers rather than the kids. So we provide cases of paper, we provide
Oh, wow.
markers and stuff like that. Because a lot
Okay.
of us were teachers and got tired of paying for it ourselves and having taught, substituted in the school system here.
Mhm.
I realized that these teachers were more abused financially
Mhm.
than the average places.
Okay.
So that's what we started about 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. National Night Out is coming up. That's Tuesday, October 8th. We partner with Police and Fire. I believe they're going to do a block party this year down on Martin Street because the new fire station will be open, so that'll be fun and exciting. Lots of different community things at that, so we certainly invite all of you out there to help us engage with that. And then, of course, our annual trunk or treat. Last year we had, I think, 35, 40 trunks. We are hoping for 50 this year. I know we're going to get a whole bunch from the Cudas, right? Sun City does really great. They come out. Hilton Head Lakes, Margaritaville, we had a lot of those. We had a lot of the students from USCB that came out. So we're just trying to engage anybody and everybody. It's just a safe place for our kids to come. And, it's a big deal. So we do really well with that program. And it's a lot of fun. Okay, let me see. Rec Center, we don't have any major updates, but rumor has it we'll be breaking ground soon. We do have an official breaking ground ceremony set for, I think, October 15th. Forgive me if that's the wrong date. I'm 100%, 99.8% sure. But it looks like if we can get a few things done here in the next couple of days or so, we'll end up getting the permit to start clearing the site. So it looks like it's finally coming to fruition. So I know a lot of people will believe it when they see it. So it's coming. The basketball courts, just so you know, we did get an update from our builder. They are in the process of getting all the plans reviewed, and hopefully we'll get that started maybe by I'd say the end of this month. And it's a relatively quick process. So, and dog park, just hold that thought. We'll have to go back to council at their request before we move further with that. But other than that, that's pretty much it. We're just tagging along and doing the best we can. If anyone wants to come out and volunteer,
Well,
we
on that
absolutely
note,
love you.
both Steve and I volunteered to help you
and, you guys are the only ones that signed up.
Oh.
So, well, no, and Kevin too for logistics. We haven't had another logistics, the entertainment, it's just me and Brittany. So, and it's pretty much done, but if you'd like to come to the next meeting that we have, we can certainly invite you, but.
And when is that one? You said was on Wednesday, you think?
No, we have a committee meeting
Okay.
with, just the regular committee, subcommittees. We're not even meeting anymore, cause it's, just don't have any volunteers like we thought we would, so. But I'll alert you.
Thank you.
It's Festival on Main.
The festival in Maine, which is beginning of November, and it's just basically, in lieu of this year's Catfish Festival, we're doing Jennifer is doing this big program, for the community. Let them know that we're here.
November 6th.
November 6th is what it is?
No, it's first, and second, November first and second.
Good. Oh, I thought, okay.
Yeah, it's first and second. Oh, you're fine.
The swinging medallions.
Yes, Swing of Medallions will be here. Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
Okay, and does anybody have anything to say or to ask a question on?
I have something that's a little off topic, and I'll make it quick. Last week on my way home from working at the fire station heading down 278, I ran upon a wreck. A gentleman driving a concrete truck had blown a tire, and he went off the road very abruptly. And where he went off was a guardrail and a steep ditch. I pulled over to see what I could do to help. What I found was several men trying to get him in. The roof of the truck was this tall. I mean, it was really bad. They're trying to get hands in there and compress cuts and wounds and stuff like that. A lady that was a nurse had a stethoscope on. Someone was on 911. They were talking back and forth, giving readings, telling what was going on with this gentleman. And it seemed like an eternity, and it always does if you've ever been in one of those situations. But Hardeeville Fire Department pulled up, and the police department pulled up, and they started holding up traffic with the police. And those gentlemen in them fire trucks were amazing. They jumped out, carrying equipment. I know a bunch of them. I happen to be standing there still, and what can I help? Let me drag a hose. Let me do something. So I helped them out. But we see that kind of stuff on TV, and it's always perfect. And I don't know